Yep. All right. Okay, so we're going to talk about how we can make the most out of our Slack and Salesforce integration today. A lot of different features. They've added so much to this in the last couple of releases. It's been amazing. Background about myself: I'm a Salesforce MVP. An independent Salesforce consultant with 10 certs. I run the Lowell admin community group. So a group like this. Co-organizer of Northeast Streaming, which is an event we have in New Hampshire in October. I have a blog called Report Force, and I am based in New Hampshire in the US. So we're going to have three parts to this presentation. Part one is we're going to see how we can streamline all of our Slack channels using Flow from the Salesforce side. Part two is going to show us how we can consume reports and dashboards inside of Slack. And then part three is going to show us how we can actually start to make Slack our Salesforce UI, which might be my favorite part of this. We'll get going here. So kind of part one, the objective is really to showcase what can Flow do, with Slack, understand the different Slack actions that we have available. I'm going to use a real world project managed use case that I use in my own business every single day. So there'll be live demo of all of these sections, and we'll show you different ways you can structure your flow. So I'm going to show this in a really, really broken down, simple way. So if you're brand new to Flow, it'll be easy for you to understand and replicate. And then I'll show you how to make something a little more complex. And then I'll show you how to make something that I think is the optimal design. We'll go through all of those. So kind of the first part, if you've never connected your systems yet, it's pretty simple. You just go into your Salesforce setup. You're going to agree to terms and conditions, and it kind of walks you through a little wizard. Easy to do. We're then going to have to install some apps on the Slack side. So basically, you're going to do your Salesforce for Slack, Sales Cloud. If you're using Service Cloud, there's one for that. Very simple to do. Does not take long. And then we're going to go through our use cases for this first part. Just minimize this. We're going to create a Slack channel when a project status is marked to active. We're then going to automatically invite users to that channel when they get added as project team members. We're going to send a direct message and mention a project owner in a channel when the status is on hold. We're going to send a screen flow into Slack when it's inactive, and then we're going to archive the project when it's completed. So basically, all of these are going to trigger off of essentially one field for the most part, other than the project team members, and that's going to do something based on that status change. To do this, we have to add a couple of custom fields. So one's going to be our Slack channel ID, which is just a text field that we're going to add on our project record. And we're going to use that to tell it where to send certain messages. And then we're going to create a second one, which is Slack channel name, which is a text formula. And that's just going to help us format and have some standardization around our naming convention for our channels. Okay. Our Slack channel name formula is here. So the top row here, this is our formula. We're just kind of prefixing it with this PROJ. And then because the names have to be lowercase, we're using a lower and we're substituting basically hyphens for spaces. We can't have capital letters. We can't have spaces or special symbols. So we're just basically formatting that in our formula. It does have an 80 character limit and it must be unique. So just think about this if you're using it on maybe accounts or opportunities, like how long those names could be. You may need to trim them. So you could do in your formula add a left and a character limit, and it'll take the first 80 characters. You could do something like that fairly easy. All right. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a channel when a project status is active. So let's hop over here. We're going to create a new project record. Let's call this nonprofit UK nonprofit group. Just put that to planning, and we're going to hit save. So we can see here we have our channel name. So this is again, it's just the formula. There's no automation here, and it's just adding PROJ and then taking our name from our record. We have our Slack channel ID. That is not populated yet because we have not changed our status to active. So what we're going to want to do here is we're going to want to update that to active and hit save and refresh. And hopefully we see some characters in that field, which we do. So this is now telling us that is the channel that we just created. If I bounce over to Slack for a second and I look at channels and I browse, I can now see that channel right here. I'm not seeing it over on the left because I haven't been added to it, but just so we know that it's been created, we can just do that search and take a peek that it's there. So let's see how we actually did this with our flow. So we're going to see how we created the channel here. This is a record triggered flow. So it's just basically triggering when the status is updated to active. And one of the important things here is you can see, I'll close this for a second, it's going down the right side. That means this is running asynchronously. And why that is important is because we could have other things happening in this flow on the left side that are running immediately, maybe updating this record, creating other records that have nothing to do with Slack at all. We want to make sure we can control the order of how these things happen. Since we're calling an external system, we don't have the option to control the timing of this part. So that's why we're running it asynchronously. And to do that, we just have to toggle, which is easy to forget, this little button down the bottom. And that's what creates that right side path for us. All right. And I'm just doing a kind of a quick decision here just to check if there's already a channel on this record. So we're just looking at that channel ID. I'm just saying it is null because we're going to create an error, right? They have to be unique. So I don't want to try and create something with the same name because I'm going to get a failure there. So just a little safeguard. And then you can see the Slack logo here. This is a Slack action. So if you've never used a Slack action, if I just click this element and I type in Slack, these are all out of the box. None of this is custom coded or custom built. It's not from any sort of third-party managed package. These are all native Slack actions now, and they can do a ton of different things. So the one I'm using here is create channel. And then we just need to set some variables. So we're going to use our Sales Cloud app. Again, if I was using Service Cloud, I could use that. I'm selecting my workspace. So if you had multiple here, you'd be able to select. You have to be on Enterprise Slack to have multiple to connect to. And then we can execute this as a person or as the app itself. I always do the app itself unless I really want somebody to know this is coming from me. Then we have our Slack channel name. This is where we're sending. This is what we're creating, rather. We're saying we want to create the name based on that formula field on our project record. And then we have the option to make it public or private. And then all we're doing is we're adding the value from this action back into the channel ID field on our project record. So we're saying populate the Slack channel ID text field with the output from that above create channel action. And that's what does all the work for us. So really simple to do. And again, you can trigger this kind of any way you want, any changes to any records, and you're able to do that, with the timing and structure that you want. All right, let me jump back. If there are questions during this, feel free to jump in, Emma, or anybody that wants to kind of moderate those. Just I'm not looking at them, but just let me know and we can pause and I can answer those. All right.
You are good
Next thing we
so
want to do is,
far.
sorry.
You are good so far. No
Okay, cool. Good.
questions.
All right. So the next thing we want to do is we want to invite users to that channel when they get added to the project as team members, right? We don't want to have them request something and have a back and forth. Well, if we can automate this, we want to do that. So let's just take a look at that. So on our project record, we just have a related object for project team members. I'm just going to add myself, give myself a role. And then hopefully over here, I can now see I have that channel in my list. And if we click into it, we can see that Aaron just joined. So really simple, add somebody to that project. They're automatically added to the channel. We don't have to have any requests, any of that back and forth. So we'll look at this. So this is triggered from a different object now. We're just triggering it from the project team member. And again, we're going to go down the asynchronous path. And we're going to have to do a couple of things here. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to add, we have a variable here called user collection. And we're just going to add the user ID from that team member record that's triggering this. And I'll come back to why we have to use this collection in a few minutes. But we're just saying, hey, take that user ID, add them into this user collection, which is just a variable. Then we're using an out-of-the-box Slack action just to see, is that person in the workspace, right? If they're not in that workspace already, they're not going to be able to be added to the channel. So again, we're just selecting uh, the app where we're going to use the workspace. We're going to execute as the app. And then the only thing we have to populate in here is that user ID. So the triggering record, team member, user ID. That's all we're putting in there. Then put a decision in here to say, okay, they're checking to see if that person was in the workspace. Are they or aren't they? Because again, I'm trying to prevent errors here as much as I can. So we're just saying the output from that above action is true, meaning that person is in the workspace. Then we're using a second Slack action that actually does the invite itself. So first one is checking, second one is adding. We're using Slack channel ID. This is where we're adding them. So we're using that text field from our project record saying add this person to this channel. And then we're using this user collection that's saying who to add there. Now, when I first was trying to do this, I didn't think we'd have to use a collection here, right? I thought I'd be able to kind of just traverse, from the record here, and then the team member, and then you find the user ID, and it's not an option. And it drove me nuts, and I couldn't figure it out for a while. And then I kind of did a little research, and it does have to be a collection. So that's why we're doing that up at the top. And I think the only reason they force you to do this is it just allows you to add multiple people at once. So I could theoretically loop through all the project team members and add them all in bulk versus having to do, one individually each time this triggers. But that did trip me up a little bit when I started.
We had that question asked, and Letitia's just confirmed also answered. So brilliant. Thank you, Aaron.
You're welcome. There, so that's okay. So next we're going to send a message. And when we do that, we want to mention the project owner in a channel when the status is on hold. And then we can see here we have some syntax to the message, and I'll come back to this in a second. So let's update our status first. We're going to throw this to on hold. And we can see here we have a new message. We can see it specifically mentioned me. And then it also put the record link right in here. So I can click right from here and open back up into my record. Pretty useful. So let's take a look at this. Okay, again, just triggering off the status change. We're at mentioning a person. So we want to make sure, again, we're checking here the same thing we had in the previous flow. We're just checking to see is that person in the workspace. So basically the way we're doing that, we're just saying the record owner, that's who we're looking for. Are they in that space? Again, just another decision, was the output from that true, meaning yes, that person is in the space. Then we have two actions. The first is we're getting the Slack user ID and we're just matched. So this is an out of the box. This is fairly new. When I did this at Florida, which was I think November, this had just come out. I found out like literally the day before I was doing a dry run of this. It was new. You used to have to actually embed the Slack ID on the user record, which is what I had done previously. So this is a nice time saver here where it just says go find the Slack ID that matches the owner ID. And then we're going to notify our owner. So the conversation ID, that means channel ID. So again, we're just using the Slack channel text field from the project record. That's where we're sending the message. And then our Slack message is just a text template in our flow. So let's take a look at that. So we have our text template here. And I'll have this on a slide. Go back to the slide where you'll be able to see this syntax bigger in a second. So don't worry about that. But we're just at mentioning the owner's ID. We're tying it to the record, and then we have a record for the link. And our link is just so this is just referencing a formula variable inside of our flow, that portion of it. And our formula, again, I'll have this on the slide in a second, is right here. And that's what we're able to send. So if we look at this, we can see our syntax to message the user. We're just basically wrapping our Slack user ID with some syntax. And then our clickable link, this is super reusable. So when you look at this down the bottom, everything, sorry, let me go back. There we go. Everything in front of this bracket record ID portion is reusable. So after the plus sign, all you need to do is plug in a record ID. That could be from a variable in a flow. It could be from a get records element, and you're just populating that ID. And it's reusable everywhere. So you build this in a sandbox. It's not tied to any specific URLs or domains. It will create a clickable link everywhere. And you can use it a bunch of ways. So you can use it obviously in Slack messages. You could use it if you're still using chatter posts. You could use it if you're sending emails and you want to have a link to them for them to open the record. So really reusable. The one thing you have to remember here is this 340, that's referencing API 34.0. So a couple of releases ago, they retired all the APIs under 30. So you will have to update these at some point. When I started doing this, I knew this would be an issue, so I was trying to figure out ways to do it. And I tried creating custom object records, custom metadata types, custom settings. None of them work because when they get passed into the flow, they just pass in as text. They don't hold the formulaic value. So the way I try and do this is anytime I use this type of link, I'm going to do the actual sending from a subflow or a couple of subflows, just so I have fewer places to go make the updates when these API versions get retired. And I'll talk a little more about that in some of the later sections. All right. Next, we're going to send a screen flow into Slack when the project status is inactive. So let's get out of there. We're going to update this to inactive. Let's see here, we have a new. So we're in our channel here, we have this button here called inactive reason, just some text referencing the name of the project. And this is going to open a screen flow, and it should write back to a couple of fields we have here that are empty: inactive reason, inactive culprit. So we're going to click on this. And first thing you're going to notice up here is this looks like it kind of got cut off. I leave this in here because I didn't realize it when I first built it, but there's a character limit, and this is literally referencing the name of the flow itself. So you may want to adjust that. There isn't a setting that I've seen where you can kind of overwrite it, but just keep that in mind. And we just have two fields to fill in: help, inactive reason, inactive culprit. Like any good consultant, we're going to say it's them, and we're going to hit next. And just a little message saying that it went through, and we can finish. So let's take a look, and hopefully our fields got populated, which they did. Okay. Now we're going to go back to our channel. And one thing you might notice here is the button hasn't gone away. So if I click this again, if I want to make sure we're not overwriting each other's work, so I just have a message here saying the form has been completed, and this is being handled in our screen flow. Now, if you had built the same process in a Slack workflow, when you click the buttons of a Slack workflow, the button does disappear. Um, I'll kind of talk more about the difference between automations on one side and the other in a little bit, but just keep that in mind. So if you're using a Slack screen flow, the button's not going to disappear. There's no way to remove it, but you can at least handle the overwriting of data within your screen flow, just basically referencing those fields, which I'll show you now. So the first part of it is a screen flow that we need to create. This is nothing to do with Slack. This is just a standard screen flow. So we're just getting our project record. Then I'm just doing a check, and this is what tells us whether we're going to populate these fields or just display the message that they're already populated. So I'm just checking, are these fields null on our record? And then depending on what they are, they see one of two screens. They'll want to enter the data, or they see that's already been completed. So very simple. We're updating the records, populating those two fields for the record, just basically on the data in that screen. So really simple. This needs to get launched by something. So we're using a record triggered flow that's going to send that screen flow into Slack. And again, we're just running it record triggered asynchronously, change to the status, and then an out of the box, again, Slack action, send screen flow to Slack. We're telling it the ID. So again, we're just using that text field on our project record. And then we're just adding in some text here. I can see that I'm referencing the name of the project or the name of the record. I can customize what I want the label of the button to be. And then we're just tying it into the project record itself. So pretty easy, pretty useful. If you need certain data points to be added kind of urgently, maybe on case gets escalated and you want something in there for the folks that are working more on the Slack side, this is going to be a big time saver for them. They don't have to go log in anywhere else to do this. It's going to be right in front of them where they're already working, which is nice. All right. Once our project's done, we want to keep our channels cleaned up and consistent. So we want to archive this when it's completed, and we're just going to pin a message into the channel when that happens. All right, so let's update this to completed. We can see here we have a notification from our Slack bot saying that this project has just been archived. If I click into my channel, I can see right here that I have this message pinned to it, just saying it's been completed and this has been archived. Okay, and we always want to archive versus delete because you can still search on the history. So let's take a look at that. We're going to look at our flow. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to send a message. This is exactly what we used when we were messaging the project owner that it was on hold. So we're just telling it the ID, again, the conversation. We have our text template, which is just straight text for this, just what we want to display in the message. And then we're tying it to the record. Then we have a second Slack action, which is what pins it. We're telling it the conversation ID, the channel ID. This naming convention was confusing to me at first. So Slack message timestamp. This is just basically the message that we want to pin. So it's taking the output from this above send message action. It's just saying, hey, that message that we just sent, that's the one we want to pin in this channel. Again, a little confusing to me why they label these the way they do, but that's the way it is. And then our third Slack action in here is just the out of the box archive. And we're just telling it again, which one do we want to archive down the bottom. So that is all of our different flows that we can use for all of this. Now I showed you all those really individually because I think it's really easy for you to see and understand how they're all structured. So they were individual flows, each triggering off a different status change from this project record. Now, if you want to take it kind of a step further, we have another way to do this. So if we look at this flow,
Aaron, just a quick question for you.
sure. Yep.
Is there any decent documentation anywhere on all the available Slack actions?
I have not found like a list of these are all the ones here. Literally every time I do this presentation, I see new ones in there. Um, the Slack release notes do have some information on there, but I haven't found like a true guide. I honestly haven't spent a lot of time looking for it either. But I don't know off the top of my head if there's a great place to go look for them.
Okay, I'll maybe ask Mike Reynolds.
Yep, Mike would be a great person
Yeah,
to ask.
I'll send Mike a note and see what he says, and if we come across it, we'll put it in our user group. Thank you.
Yep. All right. So if we look at this version, just gonna back out of this a little bit. This is one record triggered flow that is just triggered on when the status is changed is true. So anytime the status changes, and then we have a decision here of what was the status updated to. And then these decision paths, these are all those individual flows that you just saw. So instead of them all being separated out, you could combine them all into one record triggered flow, just depending on what the status was updated to. That's what path it goes down. Again, there's no right or wrong way to do this. Flows, you're going to find, if you have 10 architects in a room, five are going to say do it this way, three are going to say do it that way, two are going to say do it another way. It's what works best for your organization. You certainly want to think about governor limits and order of operations and all that, but there's multiple ways to do it. So you can leave them separate. There's no harm in that. You can combine them all here. The way I like to do it is I like to use a subflow. So if we look at this version, we're again just triggering this anytime we have a status change. We have the same decision here on what status was it updated to. And then I'm just doing a simple assignment. I'm saying a variable that I've just called trigger equals active. And this is just text. And then I call a singular Slack subflow. And this is where all the work happens. So if I open this up, the only thing I'm passing in here is what object. That's just populating a variable in my subflow, which I'll show you in a second. The record, so which project record triggered this record triggered flow. And then what's our variable trigger value? And again, this is just going to have text of whatever status it was updated to. So if we look at our Slack subflow, this is where all the work happens. And we start by just the decision, what object triggered this, right? Because we have things happening when a project team member get added, which we can see right here. The rest are all on the project record. So, which object triggered this? And then within that, we're just saying what was the trigger? We're just saying that object was project and that var trigger, which we set in our record triggered flow in that assignment is active. So it's basically just saying what object and what status triggered this, or what was the action that made this subflow be called. So we have all of these again. These are all these individual flows. They're all happening in the subflow. And why I like this is because when you have things that can be triggered from multiple objects, it can be really, really difficult to figure out what they are and where they're coming from. And I kind of came up with this idea when I had a customer that had all kinds of automated tasks being created and we could not figure out where. And I ended up having to go through 50, 60 different flows to figure out all the different places they were coming from. And I'm like, this makes no sense. How do we make this more streamlined? And I came up with the idea of if I use a singular subflow to do all of this, I have one place to go. So I use this kind of methodology for anything that can be triggered from multiple objects. So Slack messages, creating channels, chatter posts, email send. So if I'm sending emails from an org, they are all going out of a singular send email subflow. If I'm creating tasks, every single different object that can create a task when something happens on one of those records, they're only getting created in those subflows. So when I need to start investigating, I have one starting point. I can kind of traverse backwards and see based on the, what we're setting values to in this, where they came from. And you can make this super granular. But that's my preference. I think it just makes it a lot cleaner and a lot less moving parts to kind of use this architecture. All right, that is kind of the end of session one. Does anybody have any questions before I move along?
No, just some fantastic feedback about talking about your flow optimization explanations. It's very helpful. Thank you.
Cool. All right, let's dive into part two. So we're going to talk about accessing reports and dashboards in Slack. So why would you want to do this in Slack? Maybe it's because it's where you live. I tell my customers, if you don't want a response from me, please send me an email. I hate email, but I will respond to every Slack message I get. That is just my preference. I'm not telling anybody don't use email, obviously, but if it's where you live, this is probably where you want to get this stuff. Two, we can bypass some system limitations that I'll get into, and we can really control the timing and the triggers that make these things happen, which we'll get into. So there's two ways we can do this. One is with the CRM Analytics app in Slack. This is a free app. This is not CRM Analytics, the old Einstein Analytics. It's nothing to do with that product. This is a plugin inside of Slack that basically lets us connect to our reports and dashboards in Salesforce, 100% free. Second way we're going to do this is using Flow again. So CRM Analytics app lets us do a few things. We can browse and view favorites as well as search. We can view and share analytics snapshots. We can send dashboards directly to Slack from Salesforce, and we can manage our subscriptions. So let's take a look at some of this. So if we start here, we can see I have this CRM Analytics app. All you need to do is browse your apps and install it. Again, this is free. This is all we're doing. Okay. Now within that app, I can see here in the home tab, I can see my recents, my favorites. This is looking at lightning reports and lightning reports and dashboards right from here. Okay. I can click on this and open it. I can also search. So if I click on my messages tab and I just do a /, we have this analytics search. If I just type sales, it's going to take a minute to run, but it should return a list of reports and dashboards with the word sales in it. It would go actually to folders as well. But we can see here, we have all these different records. Okay. We can also view our snapshots. So actually, let me bounce over to a dashboard because I like that better. If I look at my sales performance dashboard here, I can view details or I can view the snapshot. And this is what I'm trying to take a peek at. So it's going to generate this snapshot. And when it's done, it's going to put it into this messages tab. It should happen right there. There we go. And then I can see it right from here. So I could download it. I could expand it. I could also share it. So let's just say I want to share this with the sales channel. I can do that. And we look in our sales channel and we can see it's there. So we just sent them that picture. Now there's another way you can send these. So if we go back to our CRM Analytics app and I went to our dashboard here and I just hit share, I'm going to get the same window. It's going to open up. I can send it to channels. I could send it to people at the same time if I wanted to. But it's a very different experience when I use this method versus if I generate that snapshot first, I got the picture. When I do it that way, it's just basically giving you a link to tell you to go look at it. I'm not a big fan of this, so that's why I typically will take that step of I'll generate the snapshot for myself first, and then I will share the picture that way because that's what the people you're sharing with, that's what they're going to want to see. So why make them go through that extra work? Okay. All right. On the Salesforce side, if we go, once we've done our connection, and there is a setting on the Salesforce side. There's one checkbox I think we still have to check. Where is it? CRM Analytics for Slack. You just have to check this box. Once you do that, you're able to download that app and connect it. Once we have that, I can go to my dashboard. Now we have this little Slack icon. So if I'm working on the Slack side, but I want to send this to somebody who lives on the Salesforce side, I want to send this to somebody that lives more on the Slack side or in a channel, I can do that. So I can do the same thing and just send that right across. And that's going to generate. It's not going to send the picture again. It's going to send this kind of button, but it's something you can kind of trigger as a reminder for somebody to go look at something. We go back to our analytics apps. One of the other things we can do is if we view details, we can subscribe. So whether it's a dashboard or a report, we can subscribe here. And why this is important is, again, maybe you prefer to have them go to Slack versus email subscriptions from Salesforce, which have been around forever. Do you want to include that snapshot? But this also bypasses the limitations. So on this Salesforce side, it's either 5 or 7. You can have, um, email subscriptions for reports and dashboards. You get an additional 7 on the Slack side using this. So if you're maxed out on one side, you can kind of work around that. Just you're going to consume them in different places. You're getting 7 in email, you're getting 7 in Slack, but it does that. It also, um, you could send it to a channel too, so you're not using up as many on individuals, just to kind of help with that. All right, so that is kind of everything we can do within the CRM Analytics app. Again, a free plugin. Now we're going to see how we can use Flow to kind of, so all that CRM Analytics app, that's pulling things from Salesforce into Slack. Now we're going to see how we can use Flow to push things from Salesforce into Slack. And what we're going to need is a custom metadata type, custom fields, some formula and syntax, and Flow. Our
Aaron, a
use
quick
cases.
question for you. 2 questions.
Yep.
When you share a snapshot, that's a fixed period of time. But if you share the dashboard link, is that related to an actively updated dashboard?
It would be refreshed as of the point of that link being generated.
So if somebody was to click on that in, say, a week's time, are they going to get that point in time, or are they going to get like the dashboard that could have been refreshed since?
They'll have to, if it has, it's going to be whatever status it's in at that point. So if they click it a week later and that dashboard hasn't been refreshed in a week, they're going to see it there, or they could do the refresh. I
And
see.
then and then another question is, are there concerns around sharing permissions with the snapshot feature?
Well, the snapshot is just the picture, so they're not going to be able to get into the underlying data. All of this stuff does keep in part your object level access, so sharing rules, whether you can have view access, read access to the objects, folder sharing as well. So all of the native security stuff would be passed through onto the Slack side.
Oh, thank you.
Yep. Um, so a couple of use cases we're going to use for this. We're going to send an open pipeline report to the sales channel daily. And then our second is going to be we want to send a dashboard to a specific person when an opportunity is won. So let's do that. Let's look at our flow. All right. So the first one, this is going to be a scheduled flow. So we're going to want this to happen once a day. I'm going to try and get this to go in real time if I can while we're talking here. I'm on US East Coast. That's why the time may look weird to you. Hopefully this will run while we're talking here. All right. So again, we're just scheduling that. And then what we're doing here is we're using a get element and we're getting a report. And we're going to match on the unique name, which we just have here, basically our API name. And if you don't know where to get that, if you go to a report, and we edit this, and we look at our properties. This is what I'm using. You could use the name, but this is just a little less likely to change. So that's why I try and use that. And that's what we're matching on. So I'm saying, go get me the one that matches the text that I've just put in this value here. We're just getting one. We're just passing through a couple of fields to store. And again, I'm just doing a check here. Did we actually find it? So the get element, is that null? If we didn't find it, we could have some sort of notification to somebody here. Did somebody mistakenly delete it? Did it get moved into a file that is private now? Whatever we need to do, we could do that easily. And we're getting a Slack channel ID. And we're just saying where the label equals sales, okay? And how we're getting this is we're using a, just, I don't want to lose that page, using a custom metadata type for this. If you haven't used these, they're super useful. They're kind of like custom objects. They have a little more, before we do that, we can see here, my dashboard just got sent here. So this is what I just scheduled in that flow, just sent it. I have a clickable link where I can open this right up to the dashboard. Okay. So now as I go back, my custom metadata type, I just have this Slack channel mapping custom metadata type. It's like a custom object, a little more secure because they live back in setup. So only admins are going to get here. I have one custom field that I've created just called channel ID. And I love these because they're deployable. So I can build this in a sandbox and populate all these records, and then I can move them from sandbox to prod versus having to do data loads if I use like a custom object record. And then we just have our mapping records, which is just a label of what our channel name is, and then our channel ID. So I'm just saying, go find me the custom metadata type record with the label of sales, and then I need the ID that's populated there. In our channel ID, we can get from our channel, if we view details, it's right down here in the bottom, and you can copy it with this little widget here. But this is what we're looking. So right now, there's not in the previous section, I showed you how we could match on the Slack ID with the Salesforce user ID. I haven't found a method to do the channel matching yet, a way to do that. So right now, I'm just populating them to this custom metadata type. This is kind of manual. If you're if you are, what was I going to say here? Creating these channels automatically with Flow, like in the first section, we could write back to this custom metadata type rec and create a row with the ones we're creating. The ones that you're manually creating in Slack, you're going to have to manually do this portion.
Aaron, I've got two questions for you.
Yep.
What's the benefit of using the report unique name over the report ID?
Using the API name is what I use to match on.
Ah,
It,
okay,
it's less
perfect.
like, yeah, it's less likely to change. You could use either. Um, but yeah, I typically try and use the API ones if I can.
Perfect. And then another question, when should fault paths be used with Slack actions? Are
You're
there
gonna see
specific
that in
actions?
3 seconds.
Amazing. Thank you.
Yep. All right. So we've gotten our channel ID. So we got that custom metadata type, which we've called Slack channel mapping with the label of sales, and we just get the label and the channel ID retrieved. Just again, check, was it found? So we're just saying, was this get records element null, yes or no? And then we're using just a send message. So the same Slack action we used to send the message to the project owner before, we're using the same thing. Conversation ID is the channel that we retrieved from our metadata type. And then our message, again, is just text and then formula record link. And it's the same formula that we used before, that same syntax, that repeatable, clickable link pattern. All right. Now I'm glad somebody asked that question because you can see here, I've added a fault path for this. You could add this into all the other sections I did before. You could add fault paths. I just didn't update those demos. The way I do fault paths myself, because they could be triggered from think about how many dozens or hundreds of record triggered flows you have. I use a singular subflow again that does all of my fault path actions so that if I want to make a change, I'm not going into 50, 100 different flows to change that. I'm going into my one subflow here to do it. And when I do this, I pass in things. So like I know the exact element that triggered this fault path, and it's named the same as whatever the element on the left is. My message is coming from the fault message in this interview. I'm telling it which flow did this, and then I pass it in there. And the way I run these myself, and there's a million ways to do this, I have a custom object called flow faults, and it literally creates a record that tells me the element, the fault message, the flow, could be the record ID if it's being triggered by a record, could be the user that's triggering all this. And then I can report on it. So I have on a blog coming out in a couple of weeks, um, where I go into this in detail, but I avoided using fault paths forever because I was already getting an email as the admin saying, hey, this flow failed. So why do I care about adding it in there? And then I'm like, I need to be able to report on this stuff to see which flows are really not built right. Do we need to add more validations? Do we need more user training? And I came up with this method. So I got to speak on this at Cactus Force next week. So I probably got to get that blog done before then. And it'll go into detail and have demos of all this stuff. But yeah, I would always recommend adding fault paths as much as we can. All right, so that passed in our dashboard right here. Now our next one is we want to see a record triggered flow when the opportunity is won, and we're going to send a dashboard to a specific person. So I'm just going to roll this one back for a second, and then we're going to close this, and we're going to hopefully want to see sending it to myself. So I'm not going to see a notification here, but if I click into this, I should hopefully have a message that was just sent, which we do. And again, this is just that clickable link where I can open that back up. And we'll look at our last flow here. All right, now again, we're running this asynchronously. We're getting our dashboard. Now, somebody asked whether we use the report name or the report API name. Here, I'm using dashboard title. And the reason is there is no place in the UI where you can see the API name of a dashboard. I don't know why it's aggravating, but you can't. So here we only have the option to use title. We're then just checking, did we actually find a dashboard there? Then I'm getting my Salesforce user. So just saying I'm using username. I always use starts with username because now I can build this in a sandbox. And even though if that username or if you're using email, you could use starts with because then the dot invalid gets pulled off it. But the dot sandbox name gets pulled off it when I use starts with, so versus equals. So I can build this in a sandbox and deploy it and not have to come in here and change how the username displays. Then we're getting the Slack user. So same thing we matched on before. We're just trying to say we want to get the Slack user that matches that Salesforce user ID. Same thing again, we're checking, is that person in the workspace? Looking at the user ID, our decision just to see, was that above output true or false? This is our send message action again. So conversation ID is from the user, Slack message here. Is same sort of syntax, mentioning the user, some text, and then our clickable link formula we've used all along. And then we have a fault path as needed right here. All right, again, this is the same syntax you saw in the previous section. Just replace our record ID, and then however we're getting our Slack user ID. All right, any questions before I move to part 3, which won't take too long to get through? We should be done in 5 minutes, 10 minutes max.
No, you're good.
All right, let's do it. So I mentioned this at Florida Dreamin', but I think as of now, it's been like almost 3 months where I have hardly at all logged directly into my Salesforce org, my Salesforce production org for myself. I've lived in that every day for 10 years. I run my entire business on it. I have hardly at all logged directly into my production Salesforce org because I've been able to do 90% of what I need to do directly in Slack. So let's take a look at how that works. So we have a Salesforce app that we can install. And again, this is free as long as you have Business Plus on the Slack side. I think that's what it's still called. And Enterprise on the Salesforce side. This is free. It's not an add-on. And now I can see all of my Salesforce list views. So I can search for them. I can see them right here. I can click into them. So I'm on my all accounts list view. I can inline edit fields in these rows as I need to. I can also click directly into them. We can search too. So if I wanted to search for, I have this search, and just this part was a little confusing to me at first. This part right here is searching inside of Slack only. So it's looking through your channels, your conversations. This is searching inside of Salesforce. So when you do that, right now it defaults to these certain 8 objects, but you have the ability to search for any of your, so standard or custom. So right now it's a roadmap thing where you can set what your defaults are. They're doing it for you so far. Um, but just keep that in mind. I can then click directly into my record. So I'm on my account record. I can see here I have my buttons. Right now, this only shows standard actions. So if you had a custom button as an example that was launching a screen flow, right now those are not supported. But I can see all my fields on my records. I can update them all from here. There is a separate Slack object page layout we can create. So if I go to just any object here, we have our Slack record layouts. So if we don't want to have all of the, I don't have one set up here, but you can customize this here. So if you don't want to see all of the fields that you would see inside, you can do that. It doesn't have any functionality around like different tabs like your lightning pages would. So that's something it can't do, but I can edit my record here. I can also see all my related lists. A couple that don't function right now are files and notes are not supported, but the rest of them are. So I can see all of my contacts right here. I can edit the rows. I can also create new contacts as well. So just for me, does it truly save me time, like the clicks to create a new record, update a new record, or view record? It's about the same clicks, especially if you're brand new to doing it in Slack, but I'm just doing less swivel chairing. I'm not having to go log into my Salesforce or go search and do something there when I'm spending more time in Slack than I would in my own org. It just makes it really easy to do it. One of the other cool features is we now have Slack channels. Um, so if I go to my account record, there's this little component here, and I just embedded it in a channel. So if I open up my Lightning page, it's just a Slack component we can draw into the page, or drag rather. Click on my tab. It's just a Slack component. And now this allows us to use Salesforce channels, which you haven't used them before. Um, they're basically the chatter killer. So the functionality you would have from chatter of the conversation staying on the record. Now this conversation, basically each record creates its own Salesforce channel, and this all stays on the record. So if I type something in here, hello, and I go back over to my record, I can see it passes it right back and forth. And you can create those channels with Flow. So the channel action that I showed you that created the channel in the first section, there's a second version of that that lets you create these specific Salesforce channels now. That's fairly new in the last release. So they do the same thing. You just have to choose which type of channel, kind of your general Slack channel, or is it record specific? And that just tells you which one of those create channels actions you do. Um, you can also create these um, from your records. So if I go to my, sorry, just let me get to my list view. I just pick a new account. I can create that sales channel right from here. And is it a new one or is it linking to an existence? And now it creates that channel, and that's free to be used right from here, as well as on that record inside of Salesforce. So some newer features. None of the stuff was available, probably 3 months ago for the most part. And I didn't really get an announcement about it. I found this little icon in my Slack org one day, and I just started poking around, and I'm like, oh my God, look at all the stuff I can do here. Um, and I can see my account details, I can see all the messages, I can summarize it, see any, if you want to tie it, conversations together, you can do that. So I've been pretty impressed with it. Again, there's still some limitations around, some of the customizations you probably have around, custom buttons and, how the lightning pages look versus how these look. But, for people that are living more on the Slack side, this is a big deal. All right. Some resources for you. Slack Dev Workspaces. So you can get one of these and connect it to a sandbox or a Salesforce Dev Org. These things, um, what's the word I'm looking, expire and you do not get a notification. I went to do this presentation for my own admin group, and 2 hours before I went and noticed that my Slack sandbox was gone. I had to rebuild the whole thing on the fly in a couple of hours. So just make sure you're logging into them periodically, because unlike your Salesforce sandbox where you get that email of, hey, it's been 180 days, we're going to delete this in 90 days, you don't get that for these. A couple of blog posts. So the first one I did on Salesforce Break with an MVP, Engin Utkin's blog. So this shows you all of the Slack, the flow side of things that I showed, all screenshots, all the syntax, all that stuff's there. The one on the right, that's my blog from Report Force that shows you how to use everything we saw on the CRM analytics side of things. So a couple of blogs for you. I can share this deck too if we want to distribute it to anybody, not a problem. There are some Slack trailheads if you're fairly new to it. Not a ton in there, but there's a few to get you going. There's probably more on the Slack resources library itself than there are in Trailhead so far, but I know they're intending to migrate a lot of that stuff into Trailhead as well. But other than that, thank you all for having me and spending your time today with me. And if there's any other questions, I'll answer.
Amazing. Thank you, Aaron. Well, I think a few people have dropped off because they've had to go to other meetings, but general comments of like, I'm completely mind blown, but in a good way.
Okay.
I
Uh,
think that also echoes how I felt at Florida Dreaming as well. So, yeah, really good feedback. I'm sure, you can find Aaron on all socials. I say all socials. I just really opened that up there, didn't I, Aaron? Go find him anywhere. Let's rephrase that. Maybe more LinkedIn would be more appropriate. But I'm sure he'll be happy to answer questions. Okay, well, the recording will be posted. Give me a week. I know Dar has already said she'd got colleagues who wanted to see it. So we will get it posted onto our YouTube channel and try and remember to send. I think we can send like a post thing email out after. But we'll also be giving it Aaron, so I'm sure Aaron will also be sharing it too. Well,
yep.
thank you very much for coming along. That was super helpful. We're all going to go and be mind blown for the rest of our day.
Cool. Thank you very much for having me.
Okay. Thanks, Aaron. Bye.
Bye.